a pogrom in Tel Aviv on the eve of Yom Kippur, and anti-Semitism in the United States goes fake science. That and more coming up on In Focus. So I don't know if you guys saw the footage, but we're going to put some in behind me of what happened at Dizengoff Center in Tel Aviv on the eve of Yom Kippur. And by the way, it wasn't just in Tel Aviv and at this particular event. It was also in Zichron Yaakov and Rishon LeZion and I think Givatayim, where what we saw were these anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish activists from the left coming in and preventing Jews from praying in public spaces on the eve of Yom Kippur. In Tel Aviv, they were acting ostensibly as the enforcers of a Supreme Court judgment that was handed down, I think, the day before Yom Kippur, which said that public spaces in Tel Aviv can't be used for traditional Jewish services because Jewish worship traditionally has men separated from women by what's called a mechitza, which is a physical boundary between the men's section and the women's section of a synagogue that Orthodox Jews have as a matter of course, and the vast majority of Israelis who worship in Orthodox synagogues. So what essentially the Supreme Court Justice David Amit, who's supposed to be the next president of the Supreme Court, ruled was that he was outlawing the practice of Judaism in Tel Aviv, which would have made headlines if it weren't overtaken by events, and the event was a pogrom, where you had several hundred activists enforcing Amit's judgment by physically removing the mechitzas, the physical boundaries, and in the case of the prayer in Dizengoff Center, all they put up were these Israeli flags, which were really just a recommendation that men sit on one side and women on the other, since they were barred by the Supreme Court from having actual boundaries and carrying out what you might consider to be proper Jewish or Orthodox Jewish prayer service on the holiest night of the Jewish calendar, the eve of Yom Kippur. So they came in and they blocked prayer, they humiliated, they attacked physically, assaulted Jews who were trying to pray, insulted them, called them Nazis, fascists, blocked them from praying, screamed at them while they were trying to pray. And these were sites that, when I saw them last night after Yom Kippur was over, I mean, anything that you think, you just can't. It was indescribable, and I had been worried all through Yom Kippur. I kept saying to my husband, I don't know what they're doing in Tel Aviv. I bet they're doing something in Tel Aviv. This is going to be bad, because they had been talking about it for over a week beforehand, and they've really been attacking Jewish worship at Dizengoff Center and in other public spaces in Tel Aviv. They've been assaulting Chabadniks who have tefillin stands to let Jewish men and boys over 13 lay tefillin, the Jewish phylacteries that you're supposed to put on once a day before the sun goes down after your bar mitzvah. And so we've seen acts of overt anti-Semitism, attacks on Jewish worship, attack on Jewish ritual in Tel Aviv and in other areas, Herzliya, Givatayim, Rishon LeZion, Zichron Yaakov, Haifa, over the past several months by these people who are supposedly just for Israeli democracy, of course, and liberalism, because it's really liberal to block freedom of religion for Jews in the Jewish state. But so we saw that, and like I said, this has been happening for a while, and you could argue that it started really at the outset. We saw them assaulting member of Knesset Boaz Bismuth when he was giving a speech on Erev Yom HaShoah, the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day, in a synagogue in Tel Aviv, and they busted up the ceremony, the service, the memorial service for the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. because they wanted to humiliate a Likud member of Knesset and really go after a symbol of national unity, of what it means to be Israeli, of Zionism. We saw them on Yom HaZikaron. Everybody's, I don't know if you guys remember, but Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he suspended the judicial reform as the Knesset went into spring break in April, because he was hoping that by doing so he would prevent the left from carrying through on their threats to undermine commemoration of Memorial Day for fallen IDF soldiers and victims of terrorism. But in the event, they suspended the legislation. They bowed to the mob, and the mob tried to wreck the ceremonies for Yom HaZikaron, for Memorial Day, for our soldiers and terror victims anyway. And they went in and they busted up official ceremonies in Beersheba and in other cities in Israel to try to humiliate the government ministers who were speaking and to otherwise make it impossible for us to have any sense of national unity by essentially saying that there can be no national unity due to the election results in the government that was formed by the majority of Israeli voters. So this has been going on for a while, and so that's national unity. And then the Judaism part of it, we saw last week, I think it was on Thursday or Wednesday, Haaretz editor Aluf Ben came out with this article where he said that the problem with Israel's Declaration of Independence, which is the left's new basis for all of the usurpation of powers from the Knesset and the government by the court, he said that the problem with the Declaration of Independence, which they're now all wrapping themselves in along with the flag, is that it calls for a Jewish state. And so the left is becoming very open in their rejection of Israel as a Jewish state. I think we talked about it last week with Gadi Taub, that Kobi Richter, one of the money men behind the left's insurgency, said that, he voted for the Joint Arab List, which is a anti-Zionist, terror-supporting group of parties that wants to annihilate Israel as a Jewish state, and yet he's the one paying for all these flags because they're trying to hide who they are. So Kobi Richter said in an interview with Israel Radio a couple of weeks ago that, since the Jews, the Zionists, the nationalist Jews have the majority, that what they need to do in the left in order to form a government is to form a government with the Arabs. And so what he's saying is that Israel has to stop being a Jewish state. And so it's not, a lot of people are trying to present what happened in Tel Aviv and the pogroms that are going on there against Jewish ritual, religious Jews, the demonization, the defamation, the dehumanization of Jewish worship of religious Jewish people, Israelis, that this is just a really tiny minority, that this doesn't, represent what the protest movement is all about. So this is hogwash. It's absolutely what the protest movement is all about. It's absolutely what the protest movement is all about. And again, we've seen this going on for a long time, this violent rejection of Judaism. We had on this show, on the Caroline Glick Show several months ago, my friend Roni Sassover, who's working with Deputy Minister Avi Maoz, who looks like, the caricature that they're trying to present of religious Jews because he has a long beard. But what Avi Maoz is trying to do is expose how the left is transforming Israel's non-religious, as a non-Orthodox school system into an anti-religious school system, an anti-Jewish school system, an anti-Zionist school system, because these things are, and very progressive, pushing transgenderism school system, the way that Americans are suffering from now in their country. Because what the left has done here is that they've been pushing, and this is a multi-year project that we saw first in a really significant way under the previous education minister, Shasha Biton, in the Naftali Bennett government with Gideon Sa'ar, is that she's been pushing this. She pushed these projects that gave the principals of all these schools a lot of money or a lot of independence to bring in these independent programs that are put forward, that are paid for by these NGOs that are on the radical leftist fringe, where they're teaching Judaism from a critical perspective so that it's an anti-Jewish perspective, and they're indoctrinating Israeli schools as some school children in non-religious schools, but they're schools that are supposed to be Zionist, to reject Zionism, to reject the Jewish national character of the country, and to embrace a lot of the progressive bromides, which are all anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist, and, for transgenderism and all the rest of this stuff. So they've been, Avi Maoz's idea was to just make it transparent so that parents have the ability to fight back and defend their children from this indoctrination, which is being carried out without their knowledge and ostensibly against their will, and very much against their will. So Roni Sassover got into the operation when she discovered that her own children who are in these schools are not being taught anything Jewish, and in fact are being taught Judaism from an anti-Jewish perspective. And you should really watch that episode of the Caroline Glick Show, because there's a lot of really important information there. But so we see that this has been a multi-year effort by the progressive left to make Judaism hateful to Jews in Israel, to demonize Judaism, to push it out of the public sphere of life in Israel. And it reached a new height, but I don't think the last or the worst, on the Eve of Yom Kippur, most notably at Dizengoff Center in Tel Aviv, where for the past several years, I think 3 years, because of Corona and then just because it was nice, they were having public prayers on Yom Kippur outside, and also Shabbat evening prayers that were run by this NGO called the Jewish Rosh HaYehudi, the Jewish head or whatever. And it's for secular Jews, really. It's outreach to let them, become attached to their Judaism, to get a little Yiddishkeit, to feel like Judaism is theirs too. It's not just people who walk around with their hair covered or wearing kippot all the time, but it's for everybody. And the funny thing is that the left is castigating them as missionaries. Of course, what's insane, because by definition, missionaries are Christians who want to preach the glad tidings of Jesus, but it's more than that. It's like to say that Jews shouldn't be allowed to be exposed to Judaism is inherently anti-Jewish. Be that as it may, they don't seem to have a problem with missionaries when they're Christian, but Jews who try to expose Jews to Judaism and make it accessible to non-religious Jews, they're evil, and it's right to carry out pogroms and to hate them and to indoctrinate people to hate them. And the thing that's so distressing about this, there's so many things that are distressing about it. Obviously, if this had happened in Los Angeles or in Germany or in any country outside of Israel, it would have made international headlines, and every Jewish organization around the world would have condemned it. But here it happened in Tel Aviv. And so nobody really knows what's to make of it. And people are saying the two sides fought. No, there was one side who came in and aggressively attacked Jewish worship in the streets of Tel Aviv, and not for the first time. And this is after, threatening to do so for weeks before this happened. And this is after the Supreme Court outlawed the practice of Judaism in the streets of Tel Aviv, upholding a ruling of a lower court doing the same, upholding a decision by the Tel Aviv municipality ordering for there not to be separate seating for men and women when Orthodox Jews can't have services if they're not seated separately. So this is happening in Tel Aviv, in the state of Tel Aviv, previously part of the state of Israel, but they have since seceded. And, this is just one last statement I want to make about this, is that this really does bring home what Gadi Talbot and I were talking about in last week's show, which is, you cannot have a democracy in Israel unless it's a Jewish democracy, because because the vast majority of Israelis are Jewish. So the assault on Judaism in the public square in Israel and in the schools and everywhere else in Israel is part and parcel of an effort by the likes of Kobi Richter and Shikma Bressler and Ehud Barak, who's spearheading all of this, to end Israeli democracy through the Supreme Court and the media and the academy and all the rest of it, but mainly the Supreme Court, by seizing the powers of Israel's elected arms of government, the Knesset and the government, usurping it to an unelected, self-selected group of far-left, post-nationalist, post-Jewish justices like David Amit, who's supposed to be the next president of the Supreme Court, usurping that power, so seizing all of the significant powers of the democratic arms of Israel to this oligarchy, and then repressing the Jewish character of the state by stomping out expressions of Judaism in public life and in the schools. So this is exactly what's happening. The people who claim that they're fighting for democracy are fighting to end democracy in Israel as part of a larger end of ending the Jewish nature of the country, the Jewish identity of the country. We saw it very clearly on Kol Nidre and throughout Yom Kippur in Tel Aviv, and again, not only in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in Rishon LeZion, in Zichron Yaakov, and I think in Givatayim. So, this happened in many places where there was no court order banning the separate sections for sitting for men and women. And you cannot look at this as anything except an extraordinary expression of hatred of Jews. And this brings me to the second thing that I want to talk about, which is what's happening in the United States with anti-Semitism. So over Yom Kippur, there's a break about 3 hours between the morning prayers and the afternoon evening ones. And so I had printed out this article that I had wanted to read from Tablet magazine by Isabella Tabarovsky. I think it's called The Cult of Anti-Zionism. And it's a very important article, and I suggest you go to it. But what she talks about, and I had seen a headline about it, and I had said, oh, that doesn't look good. And she explained that why I was correct, that there's a new institute that has just formed, and people are lining up, anti-Semites are lining up to be founding members of it, called the Institute for the Critical Study of Zionism. Okay, it's Judith Butler and all of these celebrity anti-Semites in universities in the United States set it up. And what is it called? The Critical Study of Zionism. So this is an anti-Zionist institution. Now, not the most important, but one of the important things about understanding just how devastating this is to look at how they define Zionism. So what she says here is that how they define it is this, and I'm quoting from our article, which is quoting from their website. Zionism, the Jewish National Liberation Movement. It is a broad set of colonial and repressive work and solidarities, efforts to curate knowledge and identities, and to dismantle movements that resist it. Views it as a political ideology tightly enmeshed with racism, fascism, and colonial dispossession, and it intends to demonstrate how, and the organization, this institute, intends to demonstrate how the critical study of Zionism is deeply and essentially connected to the study of global forces, including contests over power, race, colonialism, capital, militarism, and violence. So again, this is gobbledygook. It means nothing. A broad set of colonial and repressive work and solidarities, efforts to curate knowledge and identities, and to dismantle movements that resist it. What on earth does that mean? Zionism is a movement of Jews to reinstate the Commonwealth, the Jewish Commonwealth in the land of Israel, so that Jews can determine their own fate in their own nation state, which Jews from all over the world, millions and millions of them, emigrated to the land of Israel in order to build and in order to live in. It was established 75 years ago. It has been a success. It is the largest Jewish community on earth. The vast majority of Jews in the United States and throughout the world are Zionists because the connection to the land of Israel is inherent to Jewish identity and has been since time immemorial. That is, going back to the time when God commanded Abraham to leave his home, cross over the River Jordan, and come to a land that God would show him that he would inherit, and then pass it to his son Isaac and to his son Jacob, who God renamed Israel. And so that that's the story of the Jewish connection to the land of Israel. It's a story of Judaism. That's why the overwhelming majority of Jews throughout the centuries and millennia have understood that their homeland is the land of Israel. And when they decided that they wanted to determine their own fate, they came back. Whether it was part of the modern Zionist movement, which was launched in 1882 in response to the nationalist revolutions in Europe, or whether it was across time, across the millennia, from the Rambam and the Spanish Jewry that was coming here. There were always waves of Jewish immigration to the land of Israel because everybody always understood that if you got here, you came home. You can't understand the Jewish people without Zion, which is Jerusalem, which is our capital and has been since King David built it in 3,000 years ago. So, the whole thing is ridiculous. There's no connection, as Toporowski says in her article, between what these people say Zionism is, again, a broad set of colonial and repressive work and solidarities, efforts to curate knowledge and identities, and to dismantle movements that resist it. Yeah, whatever. And it's racism, and it's fascism, and it's colonialist dispossession. And they want to demonstrate how the critical study of Zionism is deeply and essentially connected to the study of global forces, including contests over power, race, colonialism, capital, militarism, and violence. Okay, so what are they trying to do, right? What they're trying to do is transform their created Zionism, the Zionism that has nothing to do with anything that any Jew ever thought of when they thought of being a Zionist, or that they are a Zionist, or that they're just a Jew. They're trying to take this defined Zionism as something that every single person who in any way latches onto progressive ideology at any level will hate. Okay, because it's got it all. It's got colonialism. It's got gender. Why? Because reasons. It's got gender, race, power, capital, militarism, violence. All of these things that are terrible, terrible things that all intersectional progressives hate, they're all now Zionists. And then she goes through and explains how they have this whole blueprint for operation that's supposed to make Zionism the bête noire of everything, so that we're the culprit for everything. The Jews are responsible for everything. This is a fusion of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and Karl Marx's anti-Semitism and Stalinism, all wrapped together in this Institute for the Critical Study of Zionism that's launching with a big conference against the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, which has been adopted by some 40 countries, which recognizes anti-Zionism to be a form of anti-Semitism. Just a word about anti-Semitism itself, it's a stupid term. It was invented, right, by people just like these people. What's his name? Wilhelm Marr, right? So Wilhelm Marr, in the middle of the 19th century, latched onto the pseudo-science of race, right? That was all the rage then, in order to reinvent Jews as a race. So that was where we became Semites, from Shem, the son of Noah, of Noah, right? So he said, we're Semites. No Jew had really ever thought, nobody ever thought of a Jew as a Semite until Jew haters created this race and said, this is our race. So Jews became Semites because we were defined as such by Jew haters who wanted to give a scientific veneer to the ancient hatred of Jewish people and the desire to wipe us off the face of the planet. Okay? It was a response to emancipation. It was a response to lots of different things, to his failed business career, and all the Jews were successful. Whatever. He also had this weird relationship with Jewish women because he kept marrying them while he was pushing his anti-Semitic agenda. At any rate, anti-Semitism was about reinventing the Jews, about the enemies of the Jews, reinventing what a Jew was, turning us into a race and saying we were a bad race. We were Untermenschen. We were subhuman people. We were the lowest on the lows of the race ladder, and we had to be killed because we were parasites on everybody else's race. And that was racial anti-Semitism of racial anti-Judaism that was packaged as a science by calling it Semitism, which was part of the faux science of racial sciences. And here, too, this is all fake, right? The anti-colonialism, the intersectionality, the anti-racism, it's all like, it's just a way of human engineering and telling people that we're not individuals, we're only members of groups, and that our value as human beings is determined by our group membership in whatever race we happen to be in. So this is just a repackaging of race theory, but with everything upside down, except for one, which is that here, too, by redefining Israel or Jews not as Semites but as Zionists, again, the Jews are being put on the lowest rung of the race ladder, and we're the ones that are ruining everything because we're responsible for colonialism and racism and gender badness. So, I'm reading this article and I'm thinking to myself, this is yesterday, Yom Kippur, thinking, okay, so we have to fight this. The Jews in America aren't fighting this because they never understood the anti-Zionism, because they want a two-state solution, which places all the blame for the absence of peace on Israel, so that put them half the way into the anti-Zionist court, whatever. They never understood anti-Zionism because it's too hard for them to get their head around the fact that the Jews are actually the good guys and not the Palestinians, because they want peace. So they've already had a hard time fighting this. And now that it's gone pseudo-scientific, how are they going to fight this? So I'm thinking to myself, the Jews in America are in trouble. They're about to find themselves really, on the outs of everything, right? Because if this fake science of anti-Zionism, goes mainstream, and it probably will because there's endless amounts of money behind this thing, who's going to protect the Jews? Israel has to come to their defense. We're the Zionists, after all, right? We're the Zionist project. We're the nation state of the Jewish people. So, our universities have to speak out against this pseudo-scientific new Jew hatred that's being packaged as anti-Zionism, while completely deforming and inventing this completely obscene definition of what a Zionist is in order to demonize Jews, again, like anti-Semitism did. We have to defend. We have to protect. We have to wage this war. And then I'm thinking, well, who's going to do that? Our universities have been captivated by anti-Zionists. Our universities have squelched out freedom of speech. You're not allowed to support the government. You're not allowed to support judicial reform. You're not allowed to speak out against Arabs on Nakba Day who come waving the PLO flags and call for the annihilation of Israel. And you have the Jews who are being silenced against these Arabs, places like Tel Aviv University and Ben Gurion University in the Negev. And you think to yourself, who's going to protect them? Our institutions have been captivated by the pogromists on the streets of Tel Aviv and Zichron Yaakov and so on and so forth, who are blocking Jews from praying and from marking Memorial Day for our fallen soldiers and Yom HaShoah in synagogues and at military cemeteries. And the thing is that American Jews and all of these American Jewish organizations that, like the Reform movement, well, they don't like Orthodox Judaism, right? So they've been pushing the protest movement. They've been pushing this pro-democracy group, the Shikma Bresslers of the world, the Ehud Baraks of this world. They're celebrities in liberal Jewish congregations in the United States and communities. But American Jews have to understand that just as these people present a danger to Israel because they want to undermine our democracy and they want to undermine our Jewish character, again, you can't have one without the other. So they're also blocking Israel from defending diaspora Jewry because they're pushing a line that's anti-Zionist. So, I see all of these friends in the United States who have been taken in by the lies that these people are putting out, and they have so much money to do it, and a lot of it is funded by American Jewish groups, right? That they think that the Shikma Bresslers and Ehud Baraks of Israel are the good guys, or Benny Gantz, who has refused to condemn what just happened in Tel Aviv, the attack on worshippers on Yom Kippur. He said nothing. Yair Lapid sided with them. none of these politicians, even Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, and the worshipers are their voters. They're sort of the sitting on the fence. We don't like Bibi. We're nice people who wear kippot. They haven't said anything in defense of praying on the streets in Tel Aviv. So, I get why American Jews would be confused. But, when you're looking at this Institute for the Critical Study of Zionism, and you're looking at the way that Jews are being booted out of public spaces in the United States by this progressive tsunami of hatred against them, you have to recognize that the people in Israel who are undermining the Jewish character of the state, this is not for liberal values reasons. This is all for Stalinist progressive concepts about how societies ought to be organized. And there's no place for Judaism in that society. There's no place for the consent of the governed in that society. And the vision that they have for Israel is of an Israel that will let diaspora Jews be hung out to dry by these anti-Semites, these anti-Jews, these anti-Zionists, whatever you want to call them, that are marauding through the academy in the United States, that are marauding through the business world in the United States, that are marauding through Hollywood and every place that American Jews like to gather, and telling them that what they are and what they have been their whole lives and what their families have been their whole lives through the generations, thousands and thousands of years, is a broad set of colonial and repressive work and solidarities, efforts to curate knowledge and identities and dismantle movements that resist it. That Zionism is a political ideology tightly enmeshed with racism, fascism, and colonial dispossession. And that now the anti-Zionists intend to demonstrate how the critical study of Zionism is deeply and essentially connected to the study of global forces, including contests over power, race, colonialism, capital, militarism, and violence. We like to say we are one. I think that the Jewish Federations of North America had that as its slogan for many years. Maybe it still does. We are one. Well, the thing is that we are one. And whether it's a threat from inside our own gates, inside of our own Jewish world, or from outside, the same people, the same, Arab nationalists, Islamists who are attacking Israel here are the ones who are marauding through the streets of New York and Los Angeles, going after Jews every time that Hamas starts shooting their missiles at Tel Aviv. And we know that. Or in Paris, they do the same thing. Or in London, they do the same thing. But it's also true of these progressive Jews, the same ones who are busting up prayers on the eve of Yom Kippur and are pushing out Zionist scholars from a university and are demonizing the government of Israel, which was elected by 2.5 million Israeli voters, the majority, right? The same people who are demonizing them and saying that they're destroying democracy by fulfilling the will of their voters and trying to restore democratic norms and system of checks and balances on our completely out of control court that just outlawed the practice of Judaism in Tel Aviv on the eve of Yom Kippur, right? Those same people are the ones who are blocking any real defense against anti-Zionism, the new form of Jew hatred in the United States and in Europe and here in Israel itself. So we are all one. We're in this together, and either we sail forward together or we sink together. But we need each other in order to cope with this. And it's time that we stop making light of what these people are really after and what they're trying to achieve, because they're not making light of it. They're in our face telling us, just look at these videos. We can do it, but we have to be united. We have to understand that this is a common struggle, and we have to fight it. I think we can, but we have to understand that it's our job. So that's the words that I'm leaving you with, and I'm going away with my family for a little vacation up in the north next week, so I won't be here. But you can watch this again if you want to, and share it with your friends. That'd be great too. You guys all have a great Chag Sameach for Sukkot, and again, may we all be sealed in the Book of Life, and may the coming year be one of reinvigorated Zionism and commitment and belief in the justice of who we are, and we're going to move forward from strength to strength. See you later. Take care.